Hello everybody, Carlton Pearson. Welcome to Streaming Consciousness, where we stretch your and expand your way of thinking and hopefully your way of being. And we've got our music back with my friend Charles Holt, who was with my wife in the gathering in Chicago just a couple of weeks ago. Finally got the music back. We're established here in Tulsa and starting all over again to present these programs with the music and tapping on your mind and your consciousness and on your body, on your life, on your being. So we like these words. I like his lyrics. I like the way he sings and thinks. Brilliant man. And I think you're brilliant, or you wouldn't be paying any attention to what I'm saying. And you would say, maybe I'm not that brilliant. You're at least curious. And that's where brilliance comes from. Curiosity, interest, expansion, questions, queries, inquest, conquest, request. The quest for life, the quest for light, the quest for information, and the stretching of your being. I love that whole idea of moving to the next level of self-awareness and soul awareness. So tonight we're going to begin, and I don't know, I never really finish these things. I just start them, and kind of, because there's so much to say. You know, you can't get it all in. And I write it all down because all of this at some point goes in a book. But you know, I'm back to Tulsa, the scene of my prime in life, it seems. And I'm 61, going on 62 now. And it's not the same, you know, that it's been. I'm sort of rebooting and rebranding, and I've been doing that now for at least 10 years when everything sort of shifted pretty dramatically in my personal life and my professional life. Though I still speak, and I'm considered a preacher and a speaker and a bishop by many. You know, sort of once a bishop, always a bishop, even though that title initially sort of labels me and puts me in a certain category that I don't always want to be. But I can handle all that. I'm living beyond it, and it doesn't really define me. The term doesn't. No title defines you. It may describe what you do or what you're interested in doing or what you're supposed to be doing professionally, but it doesn't describe you. Or doesn't define you. So I'm loving the definitions. And, you know, I've tried to be good all my life. I was taught that almost from infancy, to be a good, as were billions of people on this planet, in all cultures and all customs and all moral situations. The Jewish Christian Bible teaches from the beginning that we as human beings were not supposed to eat from or gain our personal life-giving sustenance from the tree or truth of the knowledge of duality or good and evil, God and devil or devil. This dual consciousness is the bane of the culture, the human experience, and has caused great inner conflict and global conflict, because who's good, who's not good, and the term good suggests an alternate, which is bad. The term God in the English language is the only language whose God, whose name for the deity God is direct association with the moral terminology, good. Good and God is the same thing, and then evil is the exact opposite of that, or devil, which is another God with a little g, is kind of evil God or bad God. There's the good God and the bad God, and in our minds there's this cosmic tension and cosmic conflict going on, and we've built religions around them, and out of those religions, most of them that believe that the God or gods can be angered and then become and act out their anger in a wrath in violence and killing and famines and natural disasters, or some insurance says acts of God, an earthquake, a volcano, a hurricane, a flood. I mean, there's this superstitious belief in an invisible entity that can, at the drop of a hat, throw a tantrum and shake the whole planet that he or it created, and can destroy it. And this whole, in the Christian fundamentalist mentality, this whole idea of the end of the world, and that some cataclysmic, cosmic, eschatological or end-time function or occurrence is going to take place. Many believe in our lifetime they're looking for the signs of the second coming of the Lord, which is associated with violence. And Jesus coming back on a white horse with a sword and killing the devils and all that kind of thing. A lot of that's based on superstition and mythology, and we believed it and preached it with great passion and felt called and anointed and appointed and gifted to do it and raise funds around doing it. And millions of churches do that and religions do that, whether it's Islamic Shias and Sunnis and Kurds fighting against the infidel and to praise Allah and worship God, and you're going to get 72 versions when you go to heaven if you kill the infidels. All of this mixed up, corrupt thinking has created global tension, and I think shifting the way we think about things like that can at least reduce, if not completely eradicate, that sense of violence on the planet. So here it is, this is the second half of my life, and I'm pushing and preaching it with all good. I'm writing. I don't expect a lot of this to happen in my lifetime, and some of what I say won't be appreciated till long after I'm gone. That often happens, but I'm not saying anything new. I'm just reviving and refreshing and reinvigorating thoughts that have been on the planet for years. A lot of thinking, curious people have felt dissatisfaction with the status quo, and they're peaceful in their orientation, and they want to see peace on the planet. Jesus was one of those kinds of people, and of course, billions worship him. That's not what he intended. He was an activist. I believe he was a sacred activist and a sacred humanist. He loved humanity. And if what we read about him is true, he showed that love and kindness, not just at the cross with death, but in his living and in his teaching. A lot of people die for good, worthy causes, and we salute them. And he was one of them. But he never taught about himself or thought about himself the way we think and teach about him. We've made it a religion. And I'm a Christian. I'm a follower of Christ, and both the principle and the person. The person would be Jesus, and the principle would be Christ. Or as Anton Mesmer said, Jesus is the man, Christ is the knowledge or the science, which is pretty powerful. Anyway, according to this narrative that we call the Bible, the allegory or analogy, we did eat from the tree of knowledge, and which was supposedly the first sin or deviation from the center of the ground itself and soul. When mankind, according to the narrative, ate from that tree or began to gain its substance or sustenance off of the dual consciousness of good and evil, God and devil or devil, they begin to die. The day you eat of this tree, you shall surely die or die off or feel diminished. That's the way I interpret that. And we have wrestled with the conflict of diminishment and denunciations and depreciation since. What if there were no right or wrong? And I posted this today. What if there were no right or wrong, per se? Just actions, choices, and decisions with consequences or consequences, with sequence or sequel to them. Think about that realistically. A sequence or sequel is a thing that follows. It is a cause and effect, as Hinduism and Buddhism would say karma, which is destiny or fate following as effect from cause. Something is causing something else to respond to it. Cause and effect. That's basically a universal law. Reaping and sowing. What you sow, you reap. What you sow, you harvest. You don't always sow where you reap where you sow, but you will reap what you sow. And life demonstrates that outwardly. I'm aware of the argument regarding what impact religion has had on wars throughout human history. And I've said that I think not necessarily faith in God, but whatever kind of God you have faith in, does produce and has produced horrendous violence on this planet. And I've been a religionist, and I've been indirectly a warmonger, not a whoremonger, but a warmonger. And I felt the tension and the contest and protestation and the fighting and the conflict of proving something wrong or somebody wrong or me or us or my religion the best. For years I thought Christianity was the only true religion, and that we Pentecostal Christians were more true than the non-Pentecostal Christians. And there's been conflict and elitism and bigotry and judgmentalism. And I'm thinking about how much negative energy I allowed to flow through my being in a good portion of my life. Now, I worked hard and I did a lot of good based on my estimation of good at that time and other people's estimation of good. There's that word again, to try to help change conditions on the planet. Now, fear of God or of the gods and similar concepts throughout history, in my opinion, are the source of all global tensions and lead to greed, avarice, violence, hatred, and aggression. I believe that. Fear of the gods, not faith in gods, unless the gods you have faith in are wrathful or terrorist or angry and violent. If you have faith in that God, then you have fear of that kind of God. There's a difference. More people have faith in their fears than in their gods, but then sometimes the word God simply means fear or something to be feared, not just revered or reverenced, but feared, because if you violate that God or somehow offend that God will react in wrath and vengeance toward the offender, beginning with something horrible happening on this planet to that person, ultimately them dying, and then experiencing in Christian fundamentalism eternal damnation or doom or condemnation. All those terms are related. So that produces fear. And you have faith in that fear or that God. And so you develop moral codes and standards and what have you to appease the angry God or please the difficult God. You've heard me refer to that many times. Some believe the historical evidence is quite clear. Religion is not the number one cause of war. I think the historical evidence is clear that it is very primarily the cause of violence. Because most religion is built around fear of the gods or a God who can be triggered or can be vexed, and a God who has emotions and who talks and has words and has opinions and sits on a throne or sits in some image or manipulates mankind or creation or humanity or whatever. We have all these the ideologies about God or ideas about God and some kind of almost psychotic, sociopathic, dysfunctional entity or deity that people are afraid of. Again, I'm trying to have this discussion without denouncing faith, the virtue, and the logic of faith. But if your faith is in something fearful or because of something fearful, then I'm not sure it's pure faith. It's an abstract version of belief. It is indeed a belief. So if religion can't be blamed for most wars and violence, then what is the primary cause? What would you say? The same thing that triggers all crime, cruelty, loss of life, and other such things, is what causes violence. Well, in wars. Well, what are those things? Somebody, in arguing that religion is not the main course, said Jesus provides the answer very clearly. And he makes this comment: from within, out of the abundance of the heart, proceeds evil thoughts, fornication, thefts, murders, adulteries, deeds of coveting and wickedness, as well as deceit and sensuality and envy and slander and pride and religious foolishness. Those are all in the Bible. All these evil things proceed from within and defile the man. Well, if they proceed from within, they are the man or human. Right? That's Mark 7:21-33, this guy's quoting. That Jesus makes this comment that from within, the essence of the man, the being of the man, out of the heart proceeds evil thoughts, fornication. Well, he fails to note, this guy that's arguing that religion is not the base of violence and war on the planet. The same Bible quotes and declares that God created humankind in its or his image and likeness. So this man who has inward evil or essential evil, and I don't believe that's what Jesus taught. That's one of the comments he made. I don't believe that the original creation of humankind or created humankind or the essence of mankind or humankind is evil. I think that's the way we've been taught and that's what we've been told. But deep in our hearts, we know that's not true. We are not essentially evil. We're not essentially wrong. We are essentially good. We came here believing, trusting, having faith and love for each other. We learn to hate. People always say, y'all need to learn to love. You don't really learn to love. You forget to love. But you learn to hate. Love is your essence. Peace and stability and groundedness and centeredness and focus is divine memory. Reclaiming and recalling and reconnecting and reconciling to your essence as a divine entity. Bridging divinity with humanity is the great challenge of the human spirit. That's the great journey of the soul. So that same Bible that quotes Jesus as saying that evil things come from within, and I'm not questioning that, also says that the essence of man, that God was created in divine essence, in the image and likeness. That's not a physical image and likeness, but an essential being, a moral and ethical and spiritual likeness to divinity. James, the brother of Jesus, naturally agrees with Christ, this guy says, when he says, and I'm quoting the book of James, what is the source of quarrels and conflicts among you? And he was talking about Christian quarrels and conflicts. He wasn't just talking about quarrels and conflicts among humans. He was actually referring to the church, the New Testament church, which was barely 35, 40 years old when James wrote this. Or not quite that old. What causes the source of quarrels and conflicts? Is not the source your desires for pleasure, or hedone, the Greek word is, that wage war in your members, physical members of the body? You lust and do not have, or you want and do not have what you want. You commit murder. You are envious and cannot obtain, so you fight and quarrel, he says. This man is using those scriptures to say that humankind is essentially evil. But he's forgetting that the same God that's quoting the scripture would believe that God created humankind in its image and likeness, or his image and likeness. So he's basically saying that mankind, not religion or Christianity, is essentially evil. But the guy is basically also saying that God created humankind, because he's defending religion. So obviously he's a religious person. In the end, the evidence shows that the atheists are quite wrong about the wars they claim so desperately despise. They claim this is what this man is saying. Sin is the number one issue or cause of war and violence, not religion, and certainly not Christianity. Well, to say sin is a religious term. If he says sin is the number one cause and religion isn't, sin is religion. That's where sin, the concept of sin, arises. Violating some moral principle ordained by God. Come on, can we talk? Now, non-religious dictators like Stalin and Mao Zedong and Hitler and Chiang Kai-shek, Vladimir Lenin, Pol Pot, these guys, Joseph Stalin killed 42 million people. 42,672,000, so the count is. One man. Now, these are atheists or non-religious dictators, but they thought they were gods and acted out what sometimes the Bible makes God or portrays God as. These are all men who thought they were gods. They acted out the image of the all-powerful, omnipotent, which that means, or all-wise, knowing everything, of the eyes and ears everywhere. People were afraid of him. Everywhere present, the entity with eyes and ears everywhere. He knew everything. He was everything. He controlled everything. He killed anybody that offended him. That whole image is the same way before these men were born, that people had an image of God who knows everything, is everywhere, controls everything, and hates his enemies and kills his enemies. That whole concept of an entity, whether man or extraterrestrial, angel, any entity that knows everything, is everywhere, controls everything, and doesn't like anyone who doesn't believe in it or its virtue or its validity, will kill the unbeliever or the infidel, as the Muslims would say, and some Christians. There's this cosmic war. It's God against humankind. He created us according to Jewish Christian doctrine in his image and likeness. A male image and likeness, a male spirit, image and likeness. And but he doesn't like us, as the 6th chapter of Genesis says. He repented that he made us. He tried to flood us out and drown us out years ago. Then he said, next time I'm going to do it by fire, because the water thing didn't work. I know that sounds a little cocky and a little arrogant, and I sort of mean to sound a little bit that way, tonight, a little bit antagonistic, in the sense that I want to awaken the thinking of people to change while we can, and change what we can about how we perceive things. Because perception is the ultimate reality, but not necessarily the ultimate truth. And when you change, as Wayne Dyer says, the way you look at things, the things you look at change. A non or less religious world doesn't necessarily mean anarchy, violence, and all-out immorality. Immorality and immortality don't have to conflict. Morals, the word moral, the late Middle English origin of the term comes from a Latin term, moralis, which is from mors or more, which basically in Latin means custom, or the mores of a. You come from certain mores or moorings. That means customs. And a moral is a person's standard or behavior or belief concerning what is and is not acceptable for them to do or be. That's your moral conscience. Morality is concerned with or derived from the code of interpersonal behavior that is considered right, acceptable in a particular society, and varies according to the standards or customs of that particular society. It varies. If you go to certain parts of the world, some years back, females were topless. That was not immoral. That was a custom. Their breasts were exposed. Male and female breasts are exposed in these cultures. Some people go completely nude in various, billions have over the years. And then the Western world would look down upon those as being heathens, or creatures, as the King James go and preach the gospel to all creatures. Didn't say creations. It means that, but when somebody says creature, you think of a spider or a monkey or a bug or some creeping critter on the ground. It sends that signal in the English Western thought. So all these other people that are not Britons or not Westerners or not Americans are critters and creatures that need to be saved. So we have this elitist, condescending, bigoted attitude toward the rest of the world, and that infuriates them and humiliates them in some ways, and it causes disdain. And I was that way because that's the way I was taught. I wasn't aware that I was that way. It took me some years to awaken to the demeaning attitude. Again, morals comes from the idea of customs, or what is customary or common, and custom is a tradition and widely accepted way of being or behaving or doing something that is specific to a particular society, a particular place, and a particular time or age. The interesting thing in today's culture is that customs are literally and in some ways forcefully changing before our very eyes. With regard to consequences, we will have to wait to see what follows and hope for our cultural best. And our attitude determines our altitude. We don't know how high we'll fly or go. Things literally are changing in our culture. I'm going to talk about that tonight, and I've been posting about it all day, yesterday and today. After spending the first 50 years of my life as an evangelist, pastor, and bishop in the Lord's church, trying and hoping to get people and the world saved, and then seeing where things are in 2014 compared to what I expected 40 years ago when I officially launched my evangelistic ministry, I reflect now with pensive amazement at how ineffective my efforts were based on what my intentions were. I don't deny my years as an effective, respected servant leader within the fundamentalist Pentecostal Charismatic community, but when I look at where the world is today compared to how I was hoping and trying to impact it to be back then, I can see how indeed often what you fight, you ignite, you incite, and you invite. And what you resist persists. I'm back in Tulsa. I've been here 2 months, a little more than that. There's a casino within walking distance of ORU, the Oral Roberts University. Liquor by the drink has passed. Parimutuel betting is here. All the things we fought against, it would have been an insult to us for the casino to have been literally within walking distance from the Victory Christian Center, whose founding pastor, my dear friend Billy Joel Doherty, has transitioned. Only at the tender age of 57, I attended his funeral. Shortly after that, just a few weeks, both our mentor, Oral Roberts, made his transition at 91. Our beloved Billy Joel believed that a person and taught that a person should live to his 120 based on biblical principles. And that if he did die, he shouldn't die of disease, which he did. It stunned his congregation. It stunned a lot of people. It didn't stun me because I knew he was sick 20 years, and I think his faith carried him 20 years longer than he might have lived with the kind of cancer he had. But I'm back in Tulsa, and the leaders are gone. And there's a lethargic, apathetic attitude among many religious people, not all, but many. The fire and the flame and the excitement has gone, not only in this city, but many cities and many denominations globally, and particularly here in the United States. It's just not the same. With billions of dollars raised and presumably spent to fight cancer over the last 50 years or so, the annual cancer facts and figures report that cancer remains the second most common cause of death in the United States, accounting for nearly 1 of every 4 deaths. Now, we fought it and kept it in the news and everything. Smoking, there's still millions of people who smoke, and teenagers are starting to smoke randomly, almost at epidemic levels again, even with all the denunciations of smoking. And I rarely see anybody smoking publicly anymore, but they're finding ways to smoke. In 2014, there will be an estimated 1,665,540 new cancer cases diagnosed and 585,720 cancer deaths in the United States. We've been fighting cancer and raising hundreds of millions every year, and yet it's still I think the third killer, largest killer in America. The issue is personal to me because the first trauma in my life was when I was 10 years old, and my beloved grandmother, whom we affectionately called Big Mama, transitioned at age 53 related to stomach cancer. I didn't even know exactly what cancer was at that tender age, but I've had and held a personal vendetta against the malady since. Since I was 10, that was 1964. And even more so when I was diagnosed and treated for the disease some 10 years ago. In fact, I'm experiencing residual effects from the treatment now with scar tissue and strictures from the treatment I had. And that's why I have had to cancel a couple of meetings. I plan to go to St. Louis this weekend and then Chicago the next week. I'm feeling a lot better, but I had a lot of, I just had some complications that I still have to deal with towards later on in the winter. All of the rebuking and binding and fasting and praying and believing God for healing, people were still dying in our churches and the world at large at alarming rates, and they continue to. And we've rebuked and bound and, called down fire from heaven and all that kind of stuff as people of faith. I have had great success in praying for people with cancer, but many people die of it. Most people die of it, even though the treatment is improving. I'm not saying it's not a worthwhile effort. Same with AIDS and other dread diseases that they're trying to address. But when you put it into public, like on television, the more they emphasize war, the more wars you have. The more emphasize seeing husbands killing their wives and children and the kinds of things that the news reports, spousal abuse, it increases. The media amplifies things and keeps it in our living rooms, in our bedrooms, in our minds constantly. A lot of people don't even watch the news anymore because the bad news is so bad. My former personal and philosophical resistance to women's right to choose. I was a big pro-life, anti-abortion advocate. My personal philosophical resistance to the LGBTQ, the gay civil and social rights movement. Again, parimutuel betting here in Oklahoma, liquor by the drink. Oklahoma was a dry state when I came here 43 years ago. Legalized marijuana medically or recreationally. We fought all that stuff as fundamentalist Christians. It has now proven to finally be ineffective. All that stuff we fought. And I was part of the strong and well-funded faith community that resisted today's America, and what America continues to become. I just denounced it with the Billy Grahams and the Jerry Falwells and everybody that was out there preaching, America's going to hell and America's in terrible shape and God should judge the country and sin's rampant and we need to stop all this and stop the gays and stop the progressives and stop the liberals and stop the baby killers. And I was involved in all of that, and I'm not denouncing all of that, but I'm saying I look at the condition of the world now, and it's almost as if this country, culture, has become, based on my estimations then, not now, worse. I've shifted in consciousness, so I don't have the same anxiety about these kinds of things. The right and wrong and the moral conscience that the kind of moral conscience that was prevalent in my mind and the minds of those who followed me. I relinquished a lot of that anxiety and given some things a chance to express themselves differently based on my reappraisal of them, what I think about them. I had this discussion with Billy Graham when Gina and I spent a day with him and Ruth in Oklahoma City when we were both, Billy Graham and I, participating in the memorial service for the nearly 170 people that were killed in that bombing. We had a long conversation all that morning. He too voiced his personal disparities after evangelizing. At the time, it was 50 years, and he said, "I never dreamed I would come to Oklahoma City in the middle of America to eulogize people who were killed in, at that time, the worst act of terrorism on American soil." And we were presuming it was Islamically based. It wasn't. It was this militia mentality of Americans, mostly white Americans, who are avoiding a police state and who hate the government and fight the system and buying guns up by the millions and collecting. It's like the father that had his little daughter, I don't know, she was 12 years old, shooting an Uzi, and it backfired and killed the trainer. And who would have their 12-year-old daughter thinking access to an Uzi? A multi-destruction weapon like that. That's all based on fear. Those same kinds of people think Jesus is coming back the day after tomorrow, and he's going to come on a sword, and he's going to fight everybody and kill the devil, and it's going to be 1,000 years of peace. And my dad asked about the 1,000 years of peace. I said, "Daddy, you ain't going to be here. You 87. You be happy to be here another year." And I love him with all my heart. He's my precious. That's one of the reasons I came back to Tulsa, because they're aging and I want to be near them. He's turning 88 this month, just next week, actually. But he was asking me the other day about the second coming. "You mean the Lord ain't coming back on a white horse?" I said, "What if he does, Daddy? You going to God before God comes here." He thinks Jesus is God. You will go to heaven. To be absent from your body, your scripture says, is to be present with the Lord. So let's relax, Daddy. "Well, what about my brothers?" We've been through all this conversation, but he's still... he forgets and relapses back into his old way of thinking. But Billy Graham was shaking with Parkinson's disease, and I literally cut up his breakfast for him. He said to me, "It hurts to hold a pen." That's when I took his silverware and cut his breakfast up. We were eating fruits and, yogurt and cottage cheese and things like that. And I felt for him, and he said, "I never dreamed that I would..." He said, "It seems like, with all my 50 years of preaching, it seems like things are actually worse, not only around the world, but here in America." I could feel his discouragement. I could feel his disillusionment. And I remember he shifted the conversation after it got a little heavy and awkward. He said, "But today I'm preaching to 250 million Russians. I'm on television there." And that sort of was a relief for him to say, "Well, I'm doing good somewhere because I didn't do so good here." Isn't that a shame? He's thinking, and I'm thinking now how he thought and feeling it. What we preached against in many ways has prevailed. Sin. What we preached against, the liberals and the progressives and those who didn't necessarily support and embrace biblical moralities and family values the way we evangelical fundamentalists did, they're winning. Now, that's not a lamentation. I'm not complaining. I'm just observing. That's not a criticism. It's an observation. The gays, here come the gays. Is he the gay? This whole idea about the gays taking over, the Ellen DeGeneres, who is one of the kindest, most generous, sweetest, good news advocates, in that she's says, go out and be kind, to remember to be kind to one another. And she gives these wonderful gifts, and I sit there when I see it, and I just get moved to tears just about every time I get a chance to see her do these wonderful gifts. She's funny, and she's witty, and she's free. The Oprah Winfreys that seem to be more liberal. I mean, she calls herself a Christian, I believe she is, but she also lives with a man to whom she's not married and gets by. She seems to embrace him gender-loving ethics and concepts, and yet she has a huge audience of millions who follow her with Super Soul Sunday. All of this stuff is pretty fascinating. And Billy Graham, I think, based on my conversation with him and other conversations I've observed since subsequent to ours in Oklahoma City back in the 90s, he has expanded. His son doesn't seem to be that expanded. Franklin doesn't. And he was there that day with Gina and me and Ruth and Billy Graham. And he didn't talk as much. I mean, it was mostly Mr. Graham and I talking and interacting, and we were the only two that were allowed with security following us on golf courts to go to Ground Zero and see the actual place where the building was demolished with the bomb. And he held my wife in his arms, and he was talking about how he felt I had something to say. He actually said that to me. I think we're going to hear more from you. I said, why are you saying that? He said, because we have a lot to learn from you. Billy Graham said that to me. I wish I had recorded it. But it ricocheted through my spirit and my body and shook me. But I thought he was referring to what I was preaching then. I actually think he was subconsciously prophesying about what I'm saying now, which is more expansive. And if you follow up his conversation online, you can Google Billy Graham and Robert Schuller's conversation. You'll hear them saying basically that they're not trying to convert the world anymore, just convince the world. They don't use that word, but I say it. That they are loved by God and redeemed by Christ. It's a big shift for a man born in 1917 or whenever he was born, 18, something like that. He and I were all born around the same time. Anyway, fundamentalist Christians here in Tulsa prided ourselves as being the buckle of the Bible Belt. I remember I was proud to say that as well. With strong evangelical roots and conservative Christian values and virtues and all that entails and infers. We were very proud of being deep-rooted, fundamentalist Christian evangelicals. And, no dipping, tipping, sipping, no smoking and drinking and cussing and lusting and fussing and partying. And, this town basically, when I came here 43 years ago, shut down on Sundays, Sabbath. And the stores, if they opened, didn't open till afternoon. Still to this day, a lot of that happens because there's a huge fundamentalist constituency here. If I'd changed my consciousness and expanded it to where I am, I'd be hanging my head in grief, shame, disillusionment, embarrassment, discouragement, disenchantment, because of how things have seemed to have deteriorated based on my estimation in those days, morally, spiritually, and politically in this state, with all of our work and efforts to the contrary. And even in this country, because we worked hard to keep America Christian and its Christian values and its Christian history, and the founding fathers, the framers, were deists or theists and, all that stuff. I would never have expected marriage equality to pass in this state. At least not this early in the game, in the political process. I would have expected to be maybe one of the very last states to do it. But Oklahoma has passed marriage equality. The church I speak at once a month here, the All Souls Church, was one of the main supporters and backers of Obama's marriage equality efforts. Who would have thunk? Who would have thunk it? I merged my church with that church when I moved away 5 years ago and went to Chicago to another New Thought church that doesn't seem to emphasize ever sin as we did. 6,000 members, they said. Place only seated 3,500. It was never completely full, though we got close to 25 to 3,000 each week. I was building it back up and trying. But it was New Thought, and the New Thought churches don't emphasize, quote-unquote, holiness the way we did. I mean, they have people living together outside of wedlock and many same-gender loving pastors as well as people in that church, in that movement. They'll have a glass of wine or they might party, but some of them are very mystical and very spiritual and very sweet and very genuine. Not unlike some fundamentalists who are a little bit less rigid. But anyway, the initiative, the Oklahoma Marriage Initiative between a man and a woman was created in 1999 by then Governor Frank Keating, who was a personal friend of mine. I actually preached his second win as governor, and I've been to the mansion many times, and we were buddies. I knew him back when he was Attorney General, when I had a little storefront out in Tulsa, out in South Tulsa. Anyway, I supported the marriage initiative 100%. It was an effort to combat poverty in the state by reducing the divorce rate. The goal was to cut divorce by a third by 2010. And I was involved with him back in the 90s. But just the opposite has happened in Oklahoma. Mirroring national trends, divorce in Oklahoma has increased while marriage has declined. And marriage has declined only because people have less confidence in the institution's virility. Stability, and it's happened, is based on what they observed in homes they were raised in, and the disparity of most marriages many of them have experienced. And in other words, the divorce rate would be higher, but fewer people are getting married. Yeah, they shagging. They don't have confidence in the institution. Many people don't have confidence in institutional religion or organized religion. They still love their image of God or some image of God, and they have faith, and they read scriptures or some holy books, and they meditate, and they may go to church occasionally or do whatever exercise they do that's devotional. But it's shifting. This state is changing. This culture is changing. And the church refuses to even admit or acknowledge that a change is occurring, even as we speak. I mean, about anywhere between 4,000 and 7,000 churches close a year in this country. 1,500 or so pastors leave the ministry every month. About that many Christians leave the church every day. Something is changing. Something has changed. Statistics show that the challenges to successful marriage continue to multiply in the state of Oklahoma, with more couples choosing cohabitation and more children being born out of wedlock. All things, along with other conservative evangelicals, passionately fought to change and decrease. We did not want it to be this way, and we worked hard and raised millions of dollars and had big meetings and luncheons and dinners and banquets and meetings and interfaith dialogues to supposedly stop all this. And I'll just admit to you, a lot of preachers are quietly, silently disillusioned, disenchanted, discouraged. They're just making a living right now. They have no passion or ambition, no ambition. They're just want to keep their pensions in place and their parsonages in place and their retirements. And the younger guys are, I just recently heard that Mark Driscoll, the young man who appeared on Nightline with me and Deepak Chopra, insisting on the presence of demons and devils and evil, has stepped down from his post and has been asked to step down and step away because he got involved in ego-driven and a lot of arrogance and elitism and misogyny and things like that. That whole expression is rapidly deteriorating. We fought abortion rights nationally, along with many other well-meaning and impassioned pro-life advocates, but the national rate remains considerably high, and would be higher were it not for access to abortion providers and the legal restrictions among the factors that affect the abortion rates. Many people don't have access to them, or they would. We had a home for unwed mothers here, and an abortion and an adoption agency when I had my ministry here. And ministers were the first guys to send their daughters to us if they were impregnated out of wedlock, particularly by African Americans. They would come to me or come to our people. I didn't handle it directly. And we would take the young daughters in and nurture them through the 9 months pregnancy and afterward, or let them have their baby, encouraging them not to abort it, but to have it here with us. And then we would put it into the adoption agency and adopt it out, send the young girl back home. But some of the first ones to come to us were daughters of ministers who were anti-abortion, but would consider aborting the child if we didn't take the young daughter in to what we call Hannah's house. So I've seen a lot. I've observed a lot. I've experienced a lot. I'm as sober and as aware and self-conscious as I've ever been in my life. I'm as solidly grounded in faith, my expression of it, and belief in divinity, human divinity, and the deities that we all are, rather than one single angry entity that I believe is a pharisaic way of approaching God. In the farthest reaches and rhythms and regions of consciousness, there is a reality that some people call God, but it's not the kind of biblical entity that is so frightening and terroristic. So other reasons attributed to a decrease in abortions is that it linked to the economic downturn. More women delaying pregnancy and increased use of contraceptives, something else conservative Christians protest and resist, along with the Roman Catholic Church. We don't want I was appalled at passing out the pill or contraceptives. I've actually, since I've expanded my consciousness and preached in some of these quote-unquote New Thought churches, I've preached in churches where if you go to the public restroom, there are condoms in there. There are contraceptives. They're free to decrease the amount of AIDS, which I always thought as encouraging promiscuity. That was my opinion in those days, and it would have been appalling to me it would have ever crossed our mind as fundamentalists to have anything like that in the public restrooms of a church. But I was actually impressed that it was in this. Very neat, and information about being clean and being neat and being decisive and less promiscuous and all that kind of thing. Anyway, I'm no longer alarmed by statistics of any kind, but I'm concerned about dealing less with symptoms than sources, more with cause than effect. Religious presuppositions about what is right and wrong has not necessarily impacted or improved the moral, ethical, or spiritual condition of the planet. In fact, if you look closely enough, you will see that the exact opposite comprehensively. All these hellfire and brimstone approaches have not worked. Look at the culture. There's a better way, and it has to do directly with a shift in consciousness and perception in what we consider sin, right and wrong, and fear-based theologies around God, or a God who judges based on such human contrivances and misconceptions of who and what divinity really is. We have this image of God, billions of us do, that needs to be changed. It's vitally important that we rethink what we believe, why we believe it, and how those beliefs add to or subtract from the quality of our lives, personally and planetarily. I put that out today, and we are doing that. And people are awakening in large numbers to another way of thinking. It's very, very powerful. I mean, very, very powerful, and in many ways pivotal. Again, I would never have expected marriage equality to pass in this state, at least not this early. According to recent polls in Rolling Stone magazine, it was the non-decision heard around the world in October, this month, in the U.S. Supreme Court, when they declined to hear appellate court cases from Utah, Indiana, Oklahoma, Virginia, Wisconsin, and Indiana, all of which had previously ruled in favor of same-sex marriage rights. A recent Pew survey found that support for marriage equality may be leveling off at an average of 52%, but that's a larger majority of people accepting it. But an ABC News Washington Post poll from March found a robust 59% of the country says, let it happen. We're tired of fighting this thing. It's okay. I'm not bothered by it. I think that there's a sign out there. I think some 32 states in Washington D.C. grant federal marriage benefits to gay couples. 32 of the 50 states. Ultimately, all of them will. I didn't expect Oklahoma to be this early in the game, but ultimately all of them will, because there's a cultural change. There is a shift in religious sensibilities. Years ago, African Americans were resisted, restrained, and relegated to a lesser citizenry in America. Now both the president and the attorney general are black. They're both African American, not to mention other very high-ranking positions of power and influence across the political, professional, scientific, athletic, and entertainment industry. Blacks are everywhere. And they were fought and resisted. But again, what you resist persists. We were fought, we were enslaved, beaten, raped, plundered as people, but now have become a huge and powerful influence in the country and the Western world. Same will occur with Hispanics, Asians, and other ethnic or so-called alien groups and cultures who live here without legal documentation. They'll all have their day. Women were at one time considered less than or second-class citizens that had to fight to even vote. And very likely, a female will be the next president of the United States. Women are the largest voting bloc or group in this country. And there are a lot of men that are wringing their hands because they don't know what to do. The glass ceiling has been plundered, or will be. It'll be broken. It'll be shattered. Very likely, Hillary Clinton will be the next president of the United States. The first female, following the first African American. Wake up. That's not bad. That's fantastic. In each case where people were denied, scriptures were used to deny and denounce them. The so-called majority didn't like them, didn't want them, or didn't welcome them to the table within the culture and the community. Now that is shifting faster every day. More than likely, an openly gay president will be elected into office during our lifetime, along with governors. In fact, they're already in congressional leadership. There are openly gay congressmen and women, and people in high positions of government and commerce and industry. I mean, this is a changed as well as changing world. Why am I bringing this up? I'm saying that the changes are necessary. They may seem dramatic and traumatic to some, but the changes are good. The changes are recuperative. The changes are restorative. The changes that are taking place in a society that's becoming freer and less restrained are beautiful and bountiful. And, of course, you don't have to see it this way, and you who don't won't experience it that way. But if you see it right, you don't have to make it right. Because what you see is what you get. See it okay. I'm okay, you're okay. I remember reading that book back in high school. Oh boy, I just thought it was of the devil. Anyway, all of this makes me think we must reconsider the mental, moral, and even spiritual patterns we as a people have adopted and consider working or workable, because many of them no longer work. There are patterns that and traditions, things we've traded down over the millennia that have to be changed. They actually are. The universe is demanding they change. So in front of our very eyes, people are pulling their heads out of the sand and go, whoa, this is a different America. This is a different Tulsa. This is a different whatever city you live in. And that's good. I made a trip to South Africa. Made a couple in the last year or so. And Gene and I plan to go back in June. We have a friend over there named Musi. And Bishop Jackson. These guys grew up in fundamentalist Pentecostalism like me. Musi is a dear friend of mine. He used to volunteer in Oral Roberts' office there. And Bishop Jackson was a big supporter of T.L. Osborne. Both men, Osborne and Oral, are from here. Were friends of mine. Dear friends of mine. In fact, at Oral Roberts' funeral, Gene and I were here. And somebody came up from behind me and grabbed me and squeezed me tightly. And I turned around. It was R.W. Shambach and T.L. Osborne. And we hugged and embraced. I saw the biggest smile I've ever seen on T.L. or on R.W. Shambach's face. And when we got through with that beautiful, sweet, almost subliminal exchange, I said to my wife, I think that's the last time I'm going to see them alive, which a year or two after both of them had made their transition. Dad Hagen, I was at his funeral, called Oral Roberts after I left it and went out to see him 2 weeks after that. I mentioned Billy Joe, who's gone. Mother Tucker, one of the stalwarts in my traditional Pentecostal upbringing in the African-American culture. Great woman, lived till she was about 93. She made her transition. Her son has gone, a daughter-in-law since then. Just a lot of change, and I'm accepting it. I'm not protesting. I don't feel any sense of defeat. I might have come across that way, and some people interpreted what I was saying as if I was lamenting. I wasn't. I'm not sad about the condition of the planet right now, because I see an evolution besides what is present. I see a positive, powerful shift that's going to make life on this planet much better experientially. You should become a part of it, and you should embrace it, and don't contest, protest, resent, and resist it. Let this powerful change occur as smoothly, and as I say often, we're not in trouble, we're in transition. Even the things that are happening in my body, the things that I've been experiencing of late, and I was rushed to the ER and in an ambulance. That thing would never have happened. Had 2 emergency surgeries. That wouldn't have happened. I go into hospitals to pray for the sick and minister people. I don't go in there as a patient, though I've had some hospital experiences over the years. But I'm getting older, and my body has to be taken care of with more delicacy. And I'm eating better and resting better. My wife Gina is a huge naturopathic advocate and believes in our doctor, our family doctor, is an osteopathist, and we believe in a better way of doing and being. And, I heard somebody say today, and I believe it, what we appreciate appreciates. What we appreciate appreciates. When I say what we appreciate, what we recognize the full worth of appreciates. It rises in value and in price. Do you appreciate what you've heard me say today? Or what you've been hearing me say repeatedly? Have you been tuning in? Have you been going to the archives, reading and listening? And some people write me, they said, I just spent 2 hours on your site, or 2.5 hours. I've listened to 40 of the lectures, or I'm on the 82nd one. We charge nothing for this, but we love your support. What you appreciate appreciates. So for you to take a time and go to the donate button and take your bank card and make a donation to New Dimensions. I have the office here in Chicago. Here in Tulsa. I have an office in Chicago. We want to expand this around the world. And cyber is a great way to do it. It takes staff. Teamwork makes the dream work. I've got to expand myself and my soul. We're settled here in Tulsa, and I'm tapping on the planet. Would you do me a great favor tonight and send a word of encouragement and demonstrate that encouragement with a 10 or 20 or 50 or 100. A lady walked to the book table in Atlanta the other day and to buy a book, and I was signing books, and she said, here's a check for $100. Well, the book was only $15. But she said, I wanted you to, this is for you because of what you do. I've been following your ministry for years, and I love you, Bishop. Well, that really, really touched me deeply. And when people do that, and you'd be surprised how small a number do. I get thousands of views of my post and responses verbally, but if just 10% of the people who respond to the views would send $10, it would be an incredible help. So I'm encouraging you to do what you can. Okay, I'm tapping. That's Charles singing. I love that album. And doing all that we know how to do to make things work. And it's supposed to happen the way it is. Will you do your part? Will you support it more directly and more profoundly and with greater sensitivity, and show that you care? Thank you for your consciousness. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your attention. Thank you for your treasure. That's what you are to me. I love you. God bless you. And as I love to say, God literally be you. Your I am self. I'm Carlton Pearson. Thanks for listening tonight. And tune in again next time. We'll have some more exciting things to discuss. And then work, read, and become. Good night.